Good evening, everyone. Many of you braved the traffic and been here on reasonable time, so thank you for that. And I'm sure a lot more are on the way. But I think in the interest of time, we'll get started. Just as a quick introduction, I'm Aman Datta. I'm a Chevening alumni to start with, and I'm now a partner with Ernst & Young. And also, currently leading the Bangalore efforts for the Chevening alumni in India. Chevening, as you all know, is UK government's international award scheme aimed at developing global leaders. Over 2,300 talented students and professionals in India, and a few lucky people like me, have been able to get this scholarship. Chevening Alumni Association of India, or CAI, is an association formed by the alumni from across the country. CAI is a not-for-profit registered society created by the alumni to leverage their combined strengths towards making India a better place. CAI has been formed under the guidance and support of the British High Commission, so we greatly appreciate that. As the head of the Bangalore chapter, it gives me immense pleasure to welcome you all to the first CAI lecture in Bangalore. This is our 16th lecture overall in India. We are honored to have with us today the Justice Santosh Hegde as our keynote speaker, Mr. Dominic McAllister, the British Deputy High Commissioner in Bangalore, and a fantastic panel of experts, and we'll speak a little bit more about that. But before we get started, I would just like to call the British Deputy High Commissioner to come and say a few words.
Good evening. This is absolutely fantastic. We've got an amazing audience here tonight. We've kind of had alumni events elsewhere that haven't had half, I think, of the people that we've got here. So congratulations. Fantastic start. I hope that this will kind of encourage others who are part of the alumni groups or others who are interested in the subjects that we will be discussing over the next couple of months to come along to some of these activities. I'm very pleased to welcome you here to the inaugural Chevening Alumni India lecture in Bengaluru. It is a great pleasure to welcome Justice Santosh Hegde to deliver the lecture on the subject of moving from consumers to citizens, engagement in urban governance. Justice Hegde's address will be followed by a panel discussion of individuals who bring their own perspective on urban governance from government, I hope, the private sector, and from the NGO space here in Karnataka. To compete and hopefully to catalyse the mix, we also have a perspective from the UK. We've been having an event this afternoon on urban governance, and we've been very lucky to have speakers here still to kind of give us that UK perspective. The Chevening Scholarship and the Fellowship Programme is the UK's government flagship global award scheme to develop skills and to build leadership. The scheme began in 1983 and is currently available in over 160 countries worldwide. There are over 46,000 Chevening alumni around the world and 2,300 across India. And Bengaluru already has over 100. And I hope that we will continue to add to those numbers as kind of scholars go off to the UK. There are a steady kind of drip of Bengaluru scholars winning scholarships under the general schemes and under the specific schemes as we go forward. Chevening Alumni India recently launched a lecture series across the country with each city chapter responsible for their region and cities. In the audience tonight, there are alumni from the Chevening scheme and also from other UK government scholarship programmes. A big welcome to you all. In Prime Minister Modi's words, you are the living bridge between India and the UK, and I would encourage you to get engaged with the diverse programme of alumni activities planned over the coming months. It could be fun and career enhancing. For those who are not Chevening alumni, fret not. The Chevening Gurukul, a flagship programme that has been run for over 20 years in India and is now accepting applications until the end of March, so please hurry. It is exclusively offered to high-flying, mid-career professionals from diverse backgrounds with a minimum of 10 years' experience. Selected fellows will be offered an intensive residential course on leadership and excellence at the University of Oxford in the Department of Politics and International Relations. If that sounds like you, please apply. If that sounds like someone else from your wider network of colleagues and friends, please encourage them to research the programme and apply themselves. Be generous. Talk about it. I wish CAI success in all this and all its future endeavours, and I look forward to working with you as we go forward. I'll now hand over to Justice Hegde to start what promises to be an enlightening evening. Thank you.
So let me just, I thought I'll take this opportunity and the honor to introduce Justice Hegde. Though he needs no introduction, he's one of the most prominent Bangaloreans. Justice Hegde is one of the most prominent Bangaloreans who epitomizes integrity, sincerity, and has inspired many of us in Bangalore and across the country. He graduated from Government Law School College and has had an illustrious career as an advocate. He became the Solicitor General, post which he was appointed as the Judge of the Supreme Court of India. He then served as the Lokayukta for Karnataka, for which we all greatly remember and miss him. He has also represented the state of Mysore in hockey, which is a little known fact. Justice Hegde has been awarded honorary doctorate of law from 6 universities. He was recognized as the Man of the Year by the Times of India twice. He was awarded the Vijay Karnataka for 2006 and 2010, the NDTV Indian of the Award for 2010. He's also received Bangalore Hall of Fame Award, Paul Harris Award by the Rotary Club Bangalore, Public Service Excellence Award by All India Management Association, as well as the Sitaram Jindal Foundation Award for exemplary services in the field of social development, and I'm sure there are many more which I'm missing, sir. So great honor to have you over here. So over to you. A warm welcome to Justice Hegde, please.
Good evening to you all. I'm not a planning expert or an expert in any one of the urban issues. Having served as Lokayukta Karnataka, I've seen what has happened to Bangalore over the last 70 years. I moved to Bangalore in the year 1956, which was real Bangalore then. The population was 4 lakhs. And Bangalore was from Malleshwaram to Basungudi, from north to south, from Alsur to Srirampuram, from east to west. I don't know where Bangalore starts now or where it ends now. Having seen Bangalore as an air-conditioned city, a garden city, a pensioner's paradise, I really feel very sorry for what has happened to Bangalore over the years. Bangalore was famous for its lakes. The Maharaja's regime, they identified various lakes and built stormwater drains to bring the water during the monsoon season to a lake, which cooled the temperature, which prevented flooding during the monsoon times. A very well planned system. I still remember coming from my house in Malleshwaram in bus to go to my college at St. Joseph's College in Residency Road. I used to see the Subhash Nagar bus stand, which is today by a bus stand. It was a lake. I have seen the football stadium as a lake. I have seen the hockey stadium as a lake. I have seen the Sampangi tank as a lake. Today, what's happened? If it rains for 10 minutes, the water comes into the house. Wonderful drainage system which the Maharaja's time they built and protected it apart from other cities. It was really a royally protected city. Today the population is 125 lakhs, from 4 lakhs to 124-25 lakhs population. Where is the place? What's happened to the planning? Is there a planning at all? If there was a planning, they wouldn't have allowed Bangalore to become an industrial city. In 1969, the state of Karnataka, or then Mysore, commissioned Sharavati Valley project, big hydroelectric project in the state of Karnataka. They had excess electricity. instead of giving electricity to the neighboring states or taking into consideration the development of satellite cities around Bangalore, our great decision makers printed beautiful brochures and sent it all over India. Come to Bangalore, air-conditioned city, pensioners' paradise, garden city. Labor is peaceful, electricity is plenty, water is plenty. I've seen that brochure myself. What happened? Unfortunately, that was a time in West Bengal there were ghettos, the factories were closed. Everybody took an opportunity of the invitation sent by the government of Mysore then, landed here in Bangalore. The population doubled in hardly 2 to 3 years. No infrastructure made for that. Bangalore was a beautiful city. It had a number of facilities for the people who work here. It had facilities like clubs, schools, colleges, which were not in plenty those days in the state of Mysore. So everybody loved coming to Bangalore. You all know what has happened to Bangalore. Unfortunately, I feel that we have a number of politicians, but very few statesmen. If we had to have statesmen instead of politicians, they would have thought of it, what Bangalore should be in the year 2000, 2010, rather than just thinking about Bangalore of 69, 70. Every decision was taken, according to me, because I have worked as a Lokayukta here. Lokayukta, as you all may know, it's an ombudsman's institution which has the jurisdiction of responding to the problems arising from administration, as also it had the right to investigate, not directly, but through the Lokayukta police, to investigate into corruption charges. The 5 years I worked in the Lokayukta, I had about 23,000 complaints about administration in this state. The police officers of the Lokayukta institution raided and trapped more than 760 officers, not police constables or revenue inspectors. Chief ministers, sitting chief minister had to go to jail, ministers who had to go to jail, MLAs, MLCs, and of course IAS, IPS officers. What is driving these people to come to this level? And in my opinion, it's the lack of moral values. Our forefathers built so many values to be followed by every citizen so that there will be peace in the society. But over the decades, maybe from the decade of 70 onwards, the greed has grown so much in the people that they have forgotten the values. So much so, today we live in a society which respects money and power, nothing else. Honesty has no meaning. You speak about honest people, forget it. He doesn't take, he doesn't allow others to take. This is the definition of honesty today. I remember when I was young, my parents used to tell me the do's and don'ts of life. If I made a mistake, I was corporally punished. When I went to school, there was a subject called moral science, which reiterated what my parents told me. What's happened today? I have, in the course of my speeches in the educational institutions, I went to an international school close by to Bangalore. During the interval, I asked the principal, "Do you have any subject on values?" She said, "Sir, every subject is about values. How to make money, how to become rich." These are the exact word a principal of an international school told me, meaning thereby, today values means rupees, annas and pies. That is the society in which we live today. If you don't change it, I don't think you'll be changing the present situation, in which event there's bound to be more clashes in the society on various grounds it could be. See the growth of greed in this country. In the decade of 50s, we had one scam called the Jeep scam. The country lost 52 lakhs of rupees in that scam. Every year, 1 or 2 scams came. All scams don't come out. Out of 10, 1 or 2 comes out. There was the Mundra scam of LIC. Many of elders may know about it. The Dalmia scam of Bharat Bank. Nagarwala scam of Central Bank. Like that, it went on and on and on. We came to the decade of 80. Bofers. Major scam at that point of time. The whole country stood up. The amount lost was 64 crores of rupees. 2010, we had 2 scams. Commonwealth Games. 70,000 crores were lost to this country. Same year, 2G scam. 1,76,000 crores were lost to this country. 2012, Colgate, 1,86,000 crores. Imagine this amount of money being siphoned by few people. What is the effect of it on the growth and development of the country? The budget of state of Karnataka, latest budget I have not calculated, for 2016, 2017, for 6.5 crores of people, for 365 days, for 4 lakh government servants and their salary, and for development, the money earmarked was 1,62,000 crores. Whereas in one scam, we can lose 1,86,000, 1,76,000. How can there be good governance? 1985, then the Prime Minister, late Rajiv Gandhi, publicly stated that out of every rupee government gives to the benefit of the poor, the beneficiary gets only 15 paise. Where in 2017, out of 10 rupees would 1 rupee reach the beneficiary. This is how the development gets bogged down. You earmark 100 crores and the money spent on development, hardly about 10 crores or 15 crores. You have seen the development in Bangalore. The roads, the flyovers. Decisions are not taken for the benefit of the people of this state or the city. Take the issue of steel flyover. The traffic experts have stated that one steel bridge, or any bridge for that matter, will not serve the purpose. Bangalore has only one road to go over the Hebal Lake towards the northern part of Bangalore and the present airport. They said there are people staying in the east of Bangalore, they have to come to the central of Bangalore and go in the same road to Hebal. People staying in the west have to come to the same place and travel to Hebal. They suggested instead of building this flyover, steel flyover, make roads from the east to go to the Hebal and Yelahanka, make from the west and take it to Yelahanka, so that the traffic will move from there rather than coming and congregating at one point to travel across the Hebal Lake. Who listens to it? 1,800 crores of rupees. But I'm glad, at least at one stage, in one protest against the steel flyover, for whatever reason may be, that decision is revoked. But will that revocation be in all other decision-making process? Let me give you an example of what, as Lokayukta, we conducted an investigation in Jayanagar. No, sorry, in north of Bangalore. I just forgot the name. Anyway, there is a huge extension now and all. According to the Town Planning Act and rules, any multi-story building cannot be constructed if it's more than ground floor and 2 floors, unless the road width is more than 30 feet. But there, the investigation showed, Jayanagar, there was a road of 30 feet. Next to that, there was a trench-like thing where sewage pipe and the water pipes were going, is 8 feet below. Next to that was BWSSB's road, exclusive road to go to the BWSSB camp. The drawing showed all the 3 parts as one road and showed it as 80 feet. And permission was given for constructing a 13-floor apartment building. We gave a direction that it should be demolished. Of course, High Court has stayed it, is still pending in the process. The building is completed by now. What sort of a mischief that is being played? Unless Bangaloreans wake up now and protect the Bangalore from further destruction, I think we have no way out. I've seen many such things in this thing. career, my tenure is 5 years as Lokayukta, how much money really goes to the project for which it is intended to spend, but how much money goes otherwise. My dear friends, Bangaloreans, there's hardly any time left to save what is left of Bangalore. Let's fight together and save Bangalore from further destruction. Thank you very much.
It was a very thought-provoking speech. I think a lot more to be thought about our core values and how we pass those on to our children, because what I also see is that even all of us today going on the road, walking around, talking to people, don't realize that our children are watching. And every time you bribe a cop on the street, you're telling your children that it is okay to bribe, it is okay to break the law. Every time you jump the red light, you're telling your children it's okay to break the law. So I think it's a great point that you make, something for all of us to think about. Now moving on to our panel discussion, we've got a fantastic lineup of speakers over here. The topic of urban governance and the role of citizens has perhaps never been more important. We have recently seen in the case of the steel flyover how citizens came together and made an impact. For years we've had inadequate infrastructure, poor conceptualization and worse execution of projects. Issues of water, waste management, water shortage, power shortage, traffic congestions. These are probably the best icebreakers in Bangalore, and most people talk about those all the time. The question that we like to debate today is, what should be the role of all of us together, you and I? What do we do differently as citizens? For this, I would like to introduce my fellow Chevening alumni, Priya, Chetty, Rajagopal, who's been an activist. Priya is an impactful business person, a CX research consultant, and a Chevening alumni, of course. Priya has 2 decades of experience in the service industry. She's a committed, visible champion of women's leadership, animal rescue, and civic issues of late. She has received various awards, including, but not limited to, the Indira Gandhi Priyadarshini Award for Excellence. She's a sought-after speaker in both industry fora and academic circles. Most recently, she's been successful in leading the charge against the steel flyover project to drive citizen interest, I think, which is of great interest to all of us. So Priya, if you could please come on stage and take it forward from here, introduce our panelists as well.
Good evening, everyone. It's nice to be impactful, but I'm not too sure whether I'd like the lectern to kind of go over when I speak. Thank you very much for this, to see a full house, and I want to say a quick thanks to the British Deputy High Commission for, being there and supporting us through this program. It's wonderful to have the first Chevening lecture right here in Bangalore, and today, in a reasonably exciting time that we live in. Justice Hegde, thank you so much for setting the tone. I think it was a very important message to give, because it is something that we just need to know in terms of going forward, and I think it puts the topic in perspective. So I'd like to, request my panelists to come up before we start the base of the, the discussion. And I hope that the format works with you. We hope to have, interactive discussion with our esteemed panelists. We hope to have questions from the audience for the last 20 minutes. So if you have something that sort of comes up, if you could kindly give it to, I think Kunain is there. If you could just give your questions to her, we'd be happy to sort of ask the panelists, or maybe you could just put your hand up. So that would be the format going forward. Let me, after once again thanking Justice Hegde for that really great setting that we can start this discussion with. We have one panelist who's going to be joining us a little late, but if I can just first request Mr. Mark Atherton to come up. He's our first panelist. We're very happy to have him. He's flown in from the UK yesterday, and he feels like it's not yesterday. Feels like it was a long, long time ago. So that's both a big plus and a compliment, I guess, to Bangalore as well. So Mark has is with the Association of Greater Manchester Authorities from May 2012, and he is the director of Environment for Greater Manchester. So he provides strategic support to the Greater Manchester Low Carbon Hub by leading the development and delivery of projects for environment and low carbon areas. So his projects include a lot of very exciting things that I'm sure Bangalore would be very, very keen to know more about, which is the initiation of a world first smart demonstration on aggregation of heat using air source heat pumps, domestic energy efficiency programs, community energy, natural capital, climate change adaptation, all very relevant to us as well. So Mark, thank you so much. We're glad that we could hijack you from the event that you've come in here for on the Bangalore Blueprint and have you here on the panel, so thank you. If I could request Naresh Narasimhan to step up and join the panel. Naresh is an old Bangalorean. I use the word old with care, but he has been in Bangalore for a very long time and is a well-known a name and recall for most people who have been to places like NGMA and all the wonderful things that he's done as a strong Bangalorean and a planner. So while an architect, and he's a practitioner and leader with over 3 decades of experience in architecture and urban design, Venkataraman Associates is well known for a multiplicity of different projects and award-winning architecture that they have done. He is an urbanist, an activist, and a creative entrepreneur, and the co-founder of the well-known earlier Bangalore Agenda Task Force, co-founder of the MOD Institute, which is an international collective of urban designers, researchers, and curators. He's also the founder of Numa Bangalore in Bangalore, which is a co-working space and a business acceleration facility. And he has supported a number of different progressive causes in the city. A lot of it is related to urban issues or to larger city and cultural issues. So he has been in the forefront of many, many interesting drives in Bangalore. So Naresh, very, very happy to have you here. We have, after Naresh, we have Shailesh, Pathak, and I'm smiling particularly hard because Shailesh is a fellow Chevening alumni, and I can afford to take some liberties by calling him in last. But Shailesh is, please come up, Shailesh, and let me have the pleasure of introducing you. By his own admission, Shailesh Pathak is PPP. He is a good example, he says, of the public-private partnership that should exist in most cities, but which he also says just now has become a bit of a bad word in the country today. But not so, because I was very fascinated to know Shailesh has got a very, very eclectic background. He does many different things. He is currently the CEO of CityInfra Capital, and his 3 decades of experience is kind of shared evenly between the private sector and the government sector. He's a civil services officer, or was with the IS. He has worked in private equity, investing and fundraising, in investment banking, project finance for infrastructure and city projects, smart cities and urban issues. His government roles include heading departments for public works and industrial development, among others. And he is on many different fora and national committees on infrastructure, capital markets, and urban development, and anti-corruption. I saw that as well. So it's really interesting and I see a few people like Shailesh who are having this wonderful combination of both, strong government services and roots and understanding of the process, and a great exposure to what the country needs now. So it's especially opportune that Shailesh has chosen to fly in from Delhi. Yeah, I should move it back. It's about to fall. Good. No, it's actually moving forward on its own. So I want this to be a very moving talk, but really not like this. So this is great. We are expecting Mr. Atheeq, who is a principal secretary and to the chief minister. He is a little held up at the moment and will join us in a few moments. So bear with us. He's quite well known. He's also is he on his way? Or should be there on in a short while. So he has done many different things, and I'm going to be happy to introduce him in just a bit. So in order to just set the context for this chat, let me just sort of take it back a bit and make a confession. For a long time, and I think it may be many of us who may feel the same way, and many of us may have gone forward a great deal as well. But my highest amount of civic engagement was when I went to vote. So, I would come back with that indelible ink, and I would have a halo around my head. I practically wanted a Medal of Honor, for going and doing this wonderful duty of voting for my corporation, for my city, for my MLA, for my MP, whatever. And it makes me think, especially after Justice Hegde's talk, that to be honest, a lot of us as citizens really are focused on the minimum and the minimal level of engagement that is really required. And that is unfortunate. So, like all reform criminals, I feel that we all must do something and we must get together. But you know what? It's never too late. So I look back at what is possible and what has already happened. And I was listening to what David was saying, and David's also here from the UK team. He says Bangalore is such a fantastic city, and all I hear the moment I sort of flew in was foaming lakes, steel bridges, and trees that are coming down. So he said, but we have such a wonderful city. Why? It is a number of different years. Atheeq, welcome. Nice to see you. So thank you so much. And I will introduce Atheeq in just a while. Please do join us. Thank you, Atheeq, for coming. So I think, if you look at that transition of what one can do as a citizen, it makes me think, because we've been for a long time, as a city which is divided. We've moved from, in some ways, Bangalore has become a bit of a caricature rather than a city. It's become a two-dimensional cardboard cutout rather than the cosmopolitan cocktail that we are. It really is so much more. It's a 470-year-old city. It has got richness and culture and beautiful weather, which of course we feel we personally own and have manufactured ourselves. So many different things, but at the end of it, we can just be limited to a foaming lake or a joke about traffic. That's what defines us today. And that's unfortunate, because we have really no part in the building of the city. We have only part in consuming the city. And that's why I think the topic, the discussion, which was from consumers to citizens. As consumers, we take in air, we take in water, we take in electricity, but we really don't give back. And as consumers, we go buy, we shop. As citizens, we engage in a very different kind of way. So I think if any time Bangalore was asking for something, it was for many years. I'm sure there are many different, what is the word for it? Issues that came up that made us think. But I think this time around is really a watershed for Bangalore in a good way, because Bangalore has come together in a way that we've never done before. And it's been with so much goodness and so much of good heart and so much of good intention that I think all of us in this room have a feeling that we need to engage, but we don't know how. Now, if you tell me I have to, given all my salary and spend all my time, and we are naturally averse to things like this. But if there is a way that we can engage and have value, have small wins, being able to create impact, I'm sure we're happy to do that. So part of this discussion, which is important to be able to understand how this works, the movement from, the need for the movement from a citizen, from a consumer to a citizen in the context of urban governance is never more marked than in the Bangalore that we have today. So what is it that we can do is an important, I think, learning from the panel. What is it that Bangalore and our citizens can do? And the bright intellectual minds of this room and the city to make it, one shining city that we can all really be proud of. So I'm going to set that is really the basis on which we start. And I'm just going to take a minute more to introduce Atheeq. I'm so sorry. Mr. L.K. Atheeq is the Principal Secretary to the Chief Minister, as I mentioned, and he has been the State Project Director of Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan. He has facilitated the universalization of elementary education. He served the Government of India on deputation from the state and was Joint Secretary in the PMO. Furthermore, he's also been senior advisor to the executive director of World Bank in Washington. And after he came back to Bangalore, he was principal secretary of the Department of Personnel and Administrative Reforms. So I'm sure Atheeq will have a lot of inputs in terms of what really happens behind the scenes. And today, he has a very visible role as the principal secretary to the chief minister. So I would like to, if I may, and I'll maybe move down, have a quick chat first with Naresh. Naresh, if you look at the Bangalore that was and is now, and if you look at the one thing that you'd want the citizens of Bangalore to do to make it the city that we should be, what would that be?
That's a big one.
Yeah.
You, Justice Hegde also spoke about it during his address, and also you mentioned it. See, for too long now, I think the citizens of, particularly of Bangalore, have been mesmerized, if that was the right word to use, by some kind of vision that our political leaders, and together with some of our corporate leaders, have been sort of promising a golden land just beyond the horizon, right? It's always just beyond the horizon. And the closer you get to it, it somehow also manages to stay behind the horizon and never really manifests. But spinning this kind of visionary tale of how Bangalore could be is, I think, a collective loss of vision. Justice Hegde mentioned during his speech that Bangalore was a paradise even in the late 80s and 90s in terms of quality of life, quality of healthcare, quality of schools, quality of climate, environment. It was more or less, according to me, almost a perfect microcosm of what a good modern Indian city would be. If I was asking today how I would view the vision of Bangalore, I would probably say, I don't want a fast forward, I want a past forward. I would change that and say that, see, the future has no metrics at all. And many of you, I'm sure, are technical people, and you don't do anything without any metrics to guide your daily business lives. But the city floats on something like, motherhood and apple pie kind of statements like, oh, we'll have a great environment, we'll have greenery, we'll have transport, without any numbers attached to it, right? So, but if you take, but curiously, India, for all its so-called lapses in administration and governance, has a ton of data. We generate data for everything. So if you go to 1990 and say, what was the air quality in Bangalore? I can tell you precisely. How many vehicles were there in Bangalore? I can tell you precisely. What schools were there? Almost every bit. Unfortunately, they all sit in separate silos across departments. There's no central place. But if we were to create a vision of Bangalore saying that 20 years from now, the air quality will be this, or 15 years, or the commute time will be Y, or affordable housing will be available to 90% of people in the city, then is the beginning of a vision for the future, right? So we should now learn to do a past forward and rather than a fast forward. That's what I would say.
Thanks. Can you hear me? Okay, great. So I think two very interesting takeaways from that. One is the past is not always something you need to get away from. So past forward is a very interesting kind of, I think, a phrase that kind of sticks in my mind. And I'm going to come back to something related to that a little later. I'd like to, if I may, just ask Mark, with the kind of experience you've had, and I'd like the juxtaposition of cities, because you've come in from Manchester, you've had quite a detailed understanding of what works, some of the public-private issues. What are your thoughts in terms of how a good interaction between citizens and government result in some really impactful moves or city growth?
So, Let me start by saying something that I've said a couple of times today, and I'm quite surprised by how many times I've said it. There are a number of similarities between Manchester or even the north of England and Bangalore. Don't think that that we're not struggling with the same sort of issues. The whole idea of how do you get more citizen participation within setting a vision and then helping to deliver the vision of a city or a city region is just as difficult and important for us as this discussion is today. I think I would ask some questions, and my first question would be, do you believe that, following on from our speaker, do you believe that values have changed, genuinely, or do you think that people's perceptions of values have changed? And I'll tell you why I asked the question. We've just done some research recently in the last month in Manchester, where we asked everybody, or as many people as we could get to respond, whether they cared about the social values, whether they cared about their neighbours, whether they cared about their neighbourhood. Not whether they liked it, not whether they thought it was good, but whether they cared about it. And we had two interesting results. 70% of people said that they cared about their society. Yeah? The second answer though was when we asked how many other people they thought also cared. And they said only less than 50% of everybody else cared. So 70% of people believed that less than 50% of people were like them. Yeah? And this is why I asked the question about whether values have changed, because that's a problem, or whether the perceptions of values have changed. In the UK, perhaps for the last 10 years now, through austerity measures, a lot of public funding has decreased quite substantially. And the government, a change in government happened, and there was an introduction of a philosophy called a big society, where the idea was to get more people engaged in society. And the examples were citizens running parks or libraries or running services that have previously been provided by either local authorities or government. And to a degree this worked. To a degree there were groups of citizens who stepped forward. But there were areas where it didn't work. And although this is a generalization, it tended to be those areas where there were middle-class people, well-educated middle-class people, they stepped forward because they had the confidence and the capacity to be able to run those services. In those areas that were more needy, more deprived, they found it very difficult to get people to stand forward and partake in those sorts of roles. And it wasn't because they couldn't, it was because they didn't have the confidence to do so. So to get big society, to get people engaged, I think I would suggest there are two or three things. One is to figure out whether people want to be engaged and whether they're willing to participate. Two is to figure out, well, if they're not engaged or participating in this civil society already, why not? And the third is perhaps working out what realistically you can ask citizens to do. Because it's a gradual process, I think, of getting citizens to take on more responsibility when they haven't felt that they've had responsibility for the last 10 years. So I hope that it's a positive message in that I hope that you will find more people will say, but I'm already engaged, or I want to be engaged, or I will stand forward. But it might take capacity, and it might take training in some ways to help people to fulfill their potential.
You make an interesting point, Mark, about perceptions, values, and also on what do we really need, to jump in, to take that step forward, to engage. Part of it comes from a feeling of being unempowered. Part of it comes from the disbelief that it would really make an impact. And some of it is perhaps, tacitly not encouraged by the so-called system. But the fact is, I think governments everywhere are seeing the need or seeing the value of engaging with civil society, with citizens. Do you think that there have been any successes because governments or the machinery has gone out to engage for the betterment of the city or the state?
In my own area, I think you have to be careful about when you engage. So the blueprint document we're talking about today is quite a high-level document, and it's quite difficult to engage people on a document such as that because it says all of the right things. You know, we want a good quality of life, we want more people in work, we want our youngsters to have good education, we want people to have access to the health system. These are sustainable city principles that everybody would sign up to. The challenge comes when you then have to say to somebody who lives over the road, but the impact of that is that we need to build a hospital next to you. And then suddenly they're not quite so keen. So the level of engagement is when you drop down from, my view, is the level of engagement is you drop down from the principle to the actual practice of this is what it means. To develop that principle into practice, these are the sorts of things that we're going to do. So another example would be, and again, similar in Manchester, we have a problem with congestion too. Not quite on this scale,
No.
but in the mornings and the evenings, I could be, if I don't drive to work, but if I did, I could sit in traffic for 2 hours before I got home. Yeah? So,
Just to make us feel better, thank you so much, Mark.
yeah. But mornings, the reason I don't drive to work is I can never guarantee what time I will arrive. So some days I could go through in 45 minutes, sometimes it's 2 hours, 2.5 hours. So there's a real need to get people out of their cars. Yeah? But a private vehicle is something that's people are very passionate about their car. They like their car. They like their own space. Yeah? So how are you going to encourage them out? Our way, we try to improve public transport. We try to make it easier for them to use public transport than to be in their car for 2 hours. Yeah? The second way, and some people will jump, some people will do that. Some people will just stay in their car because they want to stay in their car. The second is we're starting now to think about clean air zones. So we will say certain parts of the city, probably the centre parts of the city, only vehicles that are low emission vehicles will be able to enter. Not many people have low emission vehicles, so if they want to enter without a low emission vehicle, they'll have to pay a charge. Similar to a congestion charge that's in London, but it will be based on air quality. This will encourage other people to think about how they get in and out of the city. But really, the solution is perhaps more simple. The real solution is to try and get people to share cars. And the technology already exists. I think there's a trial yeah, and we're trying too. But it's very difficult to get people to do this. But isn't that the civil society that you want to try and encourage? Isn't that really about what are you going to do to make your society and make your environment and make your city better? If one of the biggest issues is about transport, people don't want to give up their cars, they need to think about how they're going to change their behaviour. And this is a very personal thing. So maybe this is one of the challenges that needs to be addressed first. And it's a good litmus test to see whether people will engage in the wider benefits of society.
I think that's an important point, Mark, that not everything comes in as a benefit. Sometimes you have to give up a little to get a little. Yeah. And it's not always that one wants to do it, you know. Though that goes a little further down the road from perhaps our discussion, which is getting people to move from make the first step of consumers to citizens, and then finding either engagement possibilities or impact, and then, you know, testing how engaged somebody is. So I think we're still in that journey, a little early in that journey. Interesting points there in terms of, you know, what you mentioned about low emission vehicles, but of course I love the bit about 2-hour traffic, right? Somehow just, you know, Schadenfreude, you just want everybody else to be as miserable as you are. So, you know, that's really nice of you, Mark. Thank you for making my evening. You know, you talked about mobility, and I want to maybe just share with Atheeq his thoughts on this space. But before I do that, and I know this is an area that you have very strong thoughts on, and you have some ideas that you would like to share. But before that, Atheeq, you know, if you look at, again, this discussion of moving from consumer to citizen, here is something, as a very senior person in the government and great impact on how the city and the state is being run. From a bureaucrat's perspective, do you feel that Bangalore has more consumers than citizens? Do you have thoughts on that, that transition? How are we behaving as Bangalore citizens?
Thank you, Priya. And I apologize for coming late. And,
We understand.
I would perhaps not like to make a judgment on the question that you raised, whether Bangalore has more consumers and less citizens, or more citizens, less. But I think if Bangalore has more consumers and less citizens, I think the failure lies with the way urban governance has evolved in this country, and particularly in cities, and Bangalore is no exception. We don't really have a formal, statutory, and a legalistic basis for engagement with citizens, and the way public service and public administration and politics have grown in this country, again Karnataka is no exception, is that we are essentially a rural service. I belong to the Indian Administrative Service. We have been trained to be a deputy commissioner and manage a district, and we are essentially we know how to manage rural areas, rural development, and we happen to come into the city, and we are not really professionally trained. Even our politicians, I think, are heavily rural oriented, and urban governance is something that we are now learning, and that learning is a chaotic process. And therefore, how do we really engage citizens? Do we really need to engage with them? Do we need to ask citizens whether we should do this or not? These are the questions which are still not settled in the minds of the people, even though everybody for political correctness agrees that the citizens need to be engaged. And if Bangalore has more consumers and less citizens, it's perhaps because we are not really been successful in drawing out the citizenship and engage with them. I have lived in other places. I lived in Washington DC for almost 3 years, and there in fact, when we come back to India, and we sometimes feel a sense of exhilaration that it's very free here. Citizens in those cities live with a lot of restrictions. They give up lots of their freedom. If you're driving, I used to live on a lane which was 25 miles per hour speed, and almost every month used to get a ticket in my mailbox. I hate it that every time, because my vehicle has just moved to 37 miles, and they give a leeway of 10 miles, but 37 miles you get a ticket for $40. And you say, why should we keep paying this? But citizens in those cities live with so many restrictions. Here we use our roads as a social space. We park our cars wherever we need. So therefore, if we there is a failure on our part in really drawing out and engaging with the citizens, and we are also not placing enough restrictions on the citizens. There is no parking. There is no very organized, systematic parking policy in Bangalore city. When you observe the road, the pavements are occupied by, again, our own utilities, our Bangalore Bescom hoardings, and our roads are occupied by parked vehicles, and then we are navigating the same space. So therefore, I think in order to make citizens, consumers, more citizens, we need to both government and the citizens need to move towards each other, and then for that I think there is a need for evolving more sustainable urban governance models, and in that respect I think we're still a long way to go.
Thank you so much, Atheeq. I still want you to talk about the mobility issue, which I know we'd all like to hear a little bit more about. Bangalore needs to. But thank you for the honesty in those statements that, at the end of it, we ourselves don't probably realize the gaps or some of the constraints on both sides. So when the learning experience, the fact that the government is also in a certain state of growth and at a certain stage in their learning curve, is I think an important takeaway, because we just assume as perhaps voters, citizens, whatever, as people of the city, that there is a certain structure which will deliver, and that's coming back to the issue of being a consumer. I remember, I don't know whether it was Naresh or maybe in another conversation where, I think maybe Naresh mentioned this. He says, the city is divided into two: people who love the city and people who live in the city, or people who use the city and people who give, who feel like they're part of it. And I don't know where I belonged for a long time. I believe I love Bangalore. I believe all of us have our own, connections with Bangalore and great excitement and connections, roots with the city. But there is an element of, demanding service. So that's very difficult to cross. That Rubicon is very difficult to cross. And I'm upset when something doesn't work. I am irritated when something doesn't happen. But we don't know enough. And the last few months have taught me only one thing, that sometimes knowledge is really the biggest lever. That once you have that, you can do so much more. And sometimes it's just that. And that's why it becomes critical to understand both sides and to work together in a more productive way. So in some ways, we're also looking at how do we move from saying, so I want this much of air, I want this much of water, because I really don't have a choice. Water is going to be at scarcity in 3 months. Air is going down steadily. And the only way we can work is not expecting, Atheeq to do everything from his point of view, but also to engage and perhaps define the problem and look at solutions which are more crowdsourced, rather than having an expectation and having it either fall below or not, or not being adequate, or whatever it is, sometimes exceed. So that transition is something I want to stay with, and I am sure that audience will have some questions about that as well. But thank you for the honesty in that, in that sharing of sometimes how the give and take is in that process. Shailesh, I was very intrigued when we spoke the last time. You talked about your different experiences in different cities, and you have a unique position in having been this side. You were chairman of PWD in your state, cadre. You are now, head of CityInfra Capital, which is in the private sector, in infrastructure. You have an interesting perspective because you can look at it from both viewpoints. There are constraints on both sides. There are constraints of being business. There are constraints of government. There are constraints of citizens. How does this all come together? Again, I'd be so happy if I would, I think we would look at defining something which we can learn from, which we can take away. The problem, I think, is clear. But what are your thoughts on this?
Thanks. I'd just like to begin with two sayings. One from my private sector hat, which is finance follows politics. I repeat, finance follows politics. If the politics is good, finance will come. As we have seen at the national level, 2012-13, there was no international dollar looking at India. And 2015-16, there's much more inflow. So finance follows politics. And the same thing is applicable to cities. And Bangalore is actually competing with Hyderabad, it's competing with Chennai, and it's competing with a lot of other cities in India. And just to put things in perspective, the US has 9 cities that are 1 million plus. India has 53. And Justice Hegde, I was listening to you very carefully. What you described from 1959, a population of 4 lakhs to 125 now, is probably true for all these 53 million plus cities. Seriously, I mean, and let me go into the future. Bangalore is going to double in population in the next 20 years. And that is going to be true for all the 53 million plus cities. So if we do not get the politics of cities right, we are not going to get the finance for these cities. So that's from my private sector hat. From my public sector hat, one of my favorite sayings is that where there is a will, there is a way. Where there is no will, there is survey. And, from a public sector hat again, who has the will to make Bangalore a better place? Who is the owner of that political will? Who is the political champion of Bangalore? And I'm taking Bangalore as an example. I'm talking about all 53 million plus cities. And there I'm afraid to say that actually Bangalore is getting out-competed. I have had breakfast at Amma Unavagam, where a pongal and idli cost me 6 rupees. A migrant in Chennai can eat for the whole day and 30 rupees. Why would she or he ever come to Bangalore where I'll spend 100? Now they'll come. Good, good. So I'm delighted to see this element of, very good, yesterday's budget, right?
Yeah,
Right.
Namma canteen.
Namma canteen, excellent. So this kind of competition is not happening among states. And the quicker we realize it, the better. It is happening between cities, among cities. And maybe, to answer your question, I think there are 3 levels of government in India. We do not have a central government, just to put it on record. We have a union government. The Constitution of India does not have the word central government anywhere. It is a union of states, so it's a union government. It is another matter that Atheeq and I were both recruited by something called not the Central Public Service Commission, but the Union Public Service Commission. And the reason why we have deliberately encouraged this central word is because the translation of union is Sangh. And nobody wants to say Sangh Sarkar, everyone wants to say Kendra Sarkar. So, for obvious reasons. The second level of government, which is equivalent actually, is the state. So the state government of Karnataka is, in theory, in the constitution, at the same level as the union government of India. The third level of government is, in theory, at the same level. The union government, the state level, and the Bangalore city government. Now let me ask all of you, ladies and gentlemen, where is the Bangalore city government? How many of you know the name of the mayor of Bangalore? And this is great. At least that's 2 out of 2 more than I thought. 3. Atheeq knows 4. And this is true for almost all cities in India. Now all of you would know 2-term chief ministers or 3-term chief ministers. Why don't you know the name of any 2-term mayor? So unless we get the politics right, finance with, look, I've studied a lot of global cities, and almost every city outside India, the political champion is the mayor. And this morning we had John Tory from Toronto, who's the mayor of Toronto, and I was there last summer, and they were laughing at me when I said that the MPs and the MLAs run our cities. And they were completely mystified. They said that the member of parliament is the federal guy in Canada, and the member of the provincial parliament is the MLA in Canada. They said, we will not let them enter into our city politics. In Bangalore, it's exactly the opposite. Nobody knows the councillors, nobody knows the mayor. In effect, the state government of all major cities is running that city. And how do you make consumers and citizens work for the city? You know, there's a political intermediation process. You elect your member of parliament, that person is supposed to represent you in parliament. You elect an MLA, that's what they're supposed to do in legislature. You elect the councillor. That councillor and that mayor is supposed to do what it takes to make the city better. You engage with your councillor. In every city across the world, councillor sizes are much smaller than the MLA sizes. So if I'm a councillor, I have not more than about 40 to 50,000 people. I have a fair idea of what those people want. But if you're an MLA, you have about 150,000, 200,000. You will never understand what exactly they want. Which is why, unfortunately in India, the lack of politics or the failure of local city politics has led to lazy activism in courts. So if there's this, a brilliant example of your activism is the steel flyover. But had it happened in any other city in the world, all the citizens concerned would have been chasing up with their councillor, and the councillor would have gone and made sure that this thing is scrapped. Instead of that, what do? We say, let's file a PIL. And with all due respect, sir, Justice Hegde, I think public interest litigation is killing local city politics. Because the incentive is to go to court and get publicity in the newspapers. I'm sure there are some media colleagues here. It is not an incentive to go to your councillor or to go to the mayor and say, what the bloody hell are you doing? So I'll just repeat what I said. Finance follows politics. And if you do not get the city politics right, we are going to ruin our cities.
Thank you, Shailesh. Thank you.
I think there's some very, very impactful points there, and thank you for sharing. you know, when you cover this, we realize also the structural issues that we have in government, and the issue of the mayor, the MLA, MP, and how we deal with it, and what we're using our structure for, perhaps incorrectly, and resulting in very poor governance, very poor movement as far as the city is concerned. I'd like to bring up a little bit of a controversial point. You know, in some ways, we look at our city as being something that is expected to attract talent, or it attracts more people, you know, because of its either its human capital, or because of its salubrious climate, or whatever. I would put it the other way around. I think, you know, most cities have reached a stage of being completely clogged. I mean, if you say the city population will double, you know, that earlier I would say, oh, how interesting, because you're looking at opportunities. Here, fear is in our heart because you know such limited resources, and the city is further going to crumble. So, are we? And I'd like Naresh to sort of comment on that. How is this going to change if structurally we are not ready